Hello and welcome to Dynamic DCUO. Valmy here. My first DCUO character, my main hero, my pride, my joy, is my little snow leopard ice character, Lonica. I wanted a demure looking character that would kick ass, and ice really delivers on that. For any of you Steve Jackson GURPS geeks out there, Lonica is one of two characters where I pulled a name from a GURPS source book. The other being Renata, my ice character. Bonus nerd points if you know which book that came from. Anyway, introductions and obscure references out of the way, let's get into the thick of it. We can always talk about my Wonder Woman and cat fixations later. Let's talk ice tactics. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to speak to you about the things on the power tree that I use and I like. If you have a question about any of the other powers that I do not talk about, please, by all means, enter it in the comments. I'll be happy to give you my take on it, or we'll do another video and give it a test run. There's things that I've tried and not liked and just moved on from. But initially, we're going to be doing some sort of a frostbite thing, which is going to be impaling ice, wintry tempest, resonating gale, something along those lines. And then a spam power like Arctic gust or snowball, reflection for the shield, bitter winds if I'm in close, area effect or supercharge there, and then I always keep number 6 up, my avalanche for crowd control and just fun stuff. Now for a short range or melee type fight, I recommend using backup, where if it's a ranged fight, then I might use the sidekick, the shield, or sidekick to give you the shielding that they'll benefit from. Now also on melee things, I have a tendency to use a turret or an extra pet as opposed to a trinket, just because I'm bad about remembering to use a trinket. I rearranged my tray a little bit to make it easier to show what I do in what order. So I'll do the shield first, then I'll pounce in, get that power interaction going, bitter winds, and then start to spam gust. And when it all dies down, we'll see on the combat indicator there what sort of damage that decided to do. And that's not a bad bit of damage. The loadout here that I'm going to show you is more of a ranged loadout, or specific ranged loadout that I would use like against a golem or other big open world boss. Keeping reflection up so you have your shield going. Wintry tempest will inflict your frostbite from a distance and do a lot of damage, even if the guy is moving around, like if it's Shog or something moving around some, it'll still give you a good bit of area damage. Then spam the heck out of Snowball. It's got a very fast cooldown, so you just go bang, bang, bang with it. And occasionally throw in Glacier Flash or wait until they get down to 35% to use the beam. But primarily your bread and butter is going to be using keeping reflection up, hitting Tempest when it cycles, and spamming with Snowball. Although I do like to throw in Avalanche, especially if there's ads, because Avalanche will do the knockdown damage and that will help. And of course keep your supercharge up and ready to go. So what I like about the range type thing is Wintry Tempest won't quite reach when things are grayed out, but the Snowball will, and so will Avalanche. So those are great for really long range. So if you're moving around a lot on the battlefield, sometimes that golem or whoever may get out of red reticule range. But once you've got things going, you can still back out to the gray area and still be hitting your targets. So that's how I would be doing that. And of course, throw in your blizzard whenever you can. And the reason I throw in the sidekick is because he will throw a shield on you. It's like an extra hard light shield. So that just adds a little bit of extra defense when you're in those big boss fights. Okay, here's a good example of using resonating gale in a situation. This is in War Torn. You see, it just pulls everything together, makes it easy to kill. Now, the difference between that and Tempest is using Tempest here in Nightstone, because there's a nice big area. You can see the type area effect that it'll have. And you got 12 seconds of pain and death. So anything that comes in that area is going to start taking damage. So if you've got a lot of mobs, it's a real good way to take them all out. or if the mob's moving around. Either way is pretty darn effective. Each to its own use. Okay, trying to demonstrate Avalanche, I'm going to use this combined metal marauder, which in Thanagar can kind of be a little bit obnoxious. But as you can see, there's an awesome knockdown effect. So it does decent damage, but what I like most is that knockdown. So it'll do a lot of that kind of damage to you. And also if you're trying to do something like these boom tubes, it does a big rabbit punch thing and takes out a lot of things really fast. So it has some definite uses along those lines. Now let's take a moment and talk about tac mods. I'm just going to cover some of the key ones real quick. For neck, you've got several choices. Escalating might is always a good choice. I tend to go with Fortified Assault because Lonica doesn't block, so it just adds a little bit extra defense, and that way she doesn't die. So you know, pick whichever you tend to choose with. With Helmet, you've got a lot of options that lead towards the supercharge. Most of your things that are based on your powers are going to be energized, like Avalanche, Impaling Ice, Wintry Tempest. So if you're having power issues, going with one of those might be helpful. I really don't have power issues, so I go with the Blizzard there, which does help get 10% of your supercharge back when you use it. With the back, I think it's kind of an obvious one. Going with Accelerated Reflection gives you that extra speed on getting your shield back, and that's really about the only decent choice in there. For legs, again, there's not really a whole lot of options. Whichever one you use the most, and I don't use Frostland much, that would be Tempest, which has a 12-second recycle, or Winds, which I think is 6 seconds. And I'm always using Bitter Winds, where Tempest I consider situational. So I go with Bitter Winds on the legs. Now hands is the kicker. If you're going to use Gust, then you really do need to go with Empowered Channeling, because Gust is interruptible, as is Avalanche, as is, I believe it was the Glacier Flash. So if you're going to use those, then Empowered Channeling is the way to go to prevent those from being interruptible. Otherwise, then I would recommend Max Damage to just get that extra bit of damage. Give you regenerative shielding if you're on the tank side, yeah, but otherwise it's not going to do you any good. So that's my take on how you go with tech mods. Now on the topic of base mods, I'll show you how I run with that. My main focus is going to be on might, because if you kill things, they don't hurt you. So might is always going to be my primary focus for DPS, followed by health and power. Obviously, I'm not as concerned about power as some other things, but definitely I like health. That way I can stay alive to kill them. And I'll do some dominance, fight, and resto, a little bit more on the fight. And I use those mostly for the tank aspect when I do some tanking. That's pretty much how I do that. And while we're on the subject of base mods, bases and league halls, Gotham and Metropolis, and Urgent Warfronts, those are your primary base mods. Now, as far as augments go, Wind is better on this than I am as far as some things, because as you can see, I put no ranks into my mighty adaptive augments, because we just keep getting new ones every time we turn around, and they do have some decent stats on their own. I will keep up my origin augments, and in both cases I go all might, all day, all along. I do try and keep a little bit going with domination and Vite for when I do some tanking stuff. Well, that, my friends, concludes my topic on ice, and DPS ice, that is, and I hope you found it enjoyable and informative. If you did, hit like and subscribe. If you've got any questions on the content, feel free to make a comment, and we'll be happy to respond in kind. And happy gaming.